best of them, not the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and do not become attached to this planet. This is Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at comic book movies that were poorly received upon release, but only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's sometimes a challenge, but always a good time. And this week, we are talking Eternals. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my friend from college, Andrew Williams. You ready for this one, Andrew?
What college did you go to? No.
Every episode I think about, what if there's a listener out there where this is the first episode they listen to? And if that's true here, someone's going to be like, these are just two college buddies that started a podcast. It's a reference from the movie.
I'm aware of this.
No joke, I've always thought shows like The Simpsons, Bob's Burgers, any TV show that has like a running gag in its opening title sequence. My whole life, I've always been like, I bet that's really fun, like the first season. And by season like 4, they probably hate it because they have to come up with a new joke or reference every single episode. And now that's my life.
I mean, that's the Simpsons couch forever. That's 30 years of having to come up with couch gags.
Yeah, that's wild. It's a chore, people. But hey, hashtag positivity podcast. I'm fortunate that I have a popular show where I get to come up with stupid stuff like that. So look on the bright side here. Andrew, let's get rolling here. What is your history with this movie? This movie that came out mere months ago. Did you see it in theaters?
I did. I did. It was in a moment where things were looking okay. So my friends and I went and saw this opening night. So sat through all near 3 hours.
Yeah, in theaters, definitely topping 3 hours with trailers and stuff. This was
Oh yeah. You were in for a ride with that one. I liked it well enough coming out. Like obviously the critical reception and this came out 3 months ago. I think it was November. So critical reception out the gate was pretty mixed. People were definitely saying this felt like a misstep and genuinely had people questioning the MCU as a whole. That was until Spider-Man came out a month later. And then all of a sudden the MCU is we're back, baby. But and so I mean it's only been a couple of months, but I did see it in theaters. I hadn't watched it since then, obviously, because how? But overall, yeah, I had a pretty it was more positive than negative coming out of it the first time. And now going back and looking at it again, I was able to kind of really hone in on the things that I enjoyed. But yeah, I saw it in theaters and liked it well enough.
Yeah, I also saw it in theaters. This movie, along with Spider-Man No Way Home, I avoided all trailers for. I knew nothing about this movie except some of the casting. I saw the poster. But the handful of times I went to a movie theater and this trailer was playing before the movie, I ran out of the theater. There's a shot of Salma Hayek on a horse the trailer starts off as. That's the only thing I saw before I saw the actual movie. So I knew nothing going in. I didn't see it opening night, but I saw it pretty early in its theatrical run. Nothing was spoiled for me. And I did that mainly because I'm not like a huge Eternals fan. I knew nothing about these characters before the movie, but this movie felt like the return of the MCU in a lot of ways, along with Shang-Chi, which came out shortly before this. I know Black Widow came out before both of those, but I watched that at home and I liked it well enough, but it didn't really feel like...
That feels more like a PS than something new.
It doesn't take place post Endgame, I guess. So like continuing the universe forward, whereas Shang-Chi, which I very much loved, and Eternals do. So I was trying to, preserve as much surprise as possible, and I, sat through 3 hours of this, and it was all new to me. And same, I came out of it definitely more positive than negative. I mean, I knew the reception. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. It's the reason that we're covering this movie at all on our podcast. It's the first movie in the MCU to not be certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, which is, Unfortunately, I think that was kind of the headlines for this movie. That's kind of like all you heard about. Like, oh my gosh, it's not praised. And even the positives, what most people were saying was, hey, it's not the worst MCU movie. You know, they'll say, hey, The Dark World or Incredible Hulk or Iron Man 3 or whatever they don't like. They'll name some movies that they think are worse than this movie. And whenever that's like the only positive you hear, hey, that's where we come in, right? We're going to have a conversation all about the high points of this movie. We're not trying to work out if it's better than X movie, where it fits in the MCU as a whole, on a scale of 1 to 10 or what have you. We just want to celebrate the high points of this movie because the conversations have been dominated by that reception.
Yes.
So let's jump into it, Andrew. As we mentioned, this movie released not too long ago, November 5th of 2021. It was made on a budget of $200 million. I mean, that's a huge budget, but pretty standard for the MCU. They print money. They can afford to do this. Now, at the box office, ultimately it brings in $402 million. There's, of course, an asterisk with this. This, as you mentioned, came out during a time, at least for us here in America, was relatively safe and normalized to go to theaters, but we're just not quite there yet. So,
right.
Who's to say how this would have performed not during a pandemic, during normal times for the world? I can almost guarantee you it would make significantly more than that. So it's hard to really judge it based off that box office. Now, a month later, Spider-Man comes out and breaks $1 billion, but that's Spider-Man. You can't compare anything to Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Spider-Man's made essentially, I mean, what you could essentially call as pre-pandemic money. It's like Spider-Man is Spider-Man. Like, it's kind of not fair to compare it to that. Like, everybody knows who Spider-Man is.
Yeah, and No Way Home was such an event that you had to see in theaters, and there's so many secrets in that movie that you don't want spoiled for you. And
you're hearing the rumors, you're hearing the hype, you're hearing everything. Everybody was like, I got to check out Spider-Man. But with Eternals, like, I could easily see people that were pretty diehard MCU fans being like, you know what, let's hold off on Eternals. Whereas with Spider-Man, everyone's like, nope, everyone's spoiling the hell out of that one. We better move fast.
On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a critic score of just 47%. Certified rotten by their standards, and it's not barely in that rotten territory. It is well, the lower side of mixed, you could say.
That's probably the nicest way of putting it.
Now, the movie is written by Ryan and Kaz Firpo. Andrew, I had to do some real research on the creative team behind this movie. So these are cousins that are a writing duo as of this movie, which is virtually the only movie they've written for. Kaz gained some notoriety with a documentary that he directed, but I was having trouble finding the line that Feige drew from well-respected documentary to writing Eternals. I cannot figure out why they reached out to this duo to get the writing started on this movie, other than MCU's or Marvel Studios' mission to sort of elevate new rising voices in the industry, and they're just really trying to get ahead of it with this team they assembled here.
Yeah, and I mean, I know they have like a writer's room, and there's people that kind of come from that. I don't know if that was where these guys kind of originated from. I know the guy, Michael Waldron, I think was one of the guys that started in that, and he did WandaVision, and now he's doing Doctor Strange. And so they have a core group that I think they like to build up. Like you said, bring new voices to the table. So yeah, but I can't say I'm super familiar with too much of his work, but good for them.
To make things stranger, there's further script work by Patrick Burley, who is really an actor who has done script work before, but again, not well known in the screenwriting world. And then the final screenwriting credit goes to our director, Chloe Zhao.
Which makes more sense because she's written all of the films she's directed thus far. So it doesn't shock me at all that once she came on board, she was like, all right, I'm going to take a pass at the script as well. So
yeah, very involved in the writing process as well as the casting, which we'll jump to. But as you mentioned before, this movie kind of gained some prominence and notoriety with independent movies that she wrote and directed, like Songs My Brother Taught Me in 2015 and The Writer in 2017. Also Nomadland, which came out in 2020. So certainly Marvel hadn't seen that movie. She wasn't hired as a director for this movie for Nomadland because it wasn't out yet.
Right.
But all three of those movies released to very high critical acclaim. I personally haven't seen them, but I'm definitely interested in checking them out after looking into it a little bit.
And yeah, Nomadland took the Academy Award for Best Picture and Best Director, I think. So
Frances McDormand in there, that looks like a slam dunk.
Yeah, she won Best Actress. So
Awesome.
Cleaned up at those Academy Awards, and then it was nominated for like 3 more for, I think, screenplay, cinematography, and editing. So clearly that was a big boon for Marvel at the time to be like, oh, Academy Award winning directors taking on Eternals. So help definitely, in another world, I think that would have definitely increased the hype for this film. But yeah, and interesting, the writing group is, I think, what I find most interesting because it just seems like an odd choice. Like, I was looking at Patrick Burley's credits, and like one of the only film credits he has is Peter Rabbit 2. And I was like, how does this happen? Like, where do you group this from? And then like his entire acting career was in like the mid-aughts. So I'm just like, this is such a strange, odd choice. Maybe Chloe Zhao was part of that. I have no idea, but
I wonder if Kevin Feige's like kids were watching Peter Rabbit 2, and like I picture him like walking by the living room and like catching in the corner of his eye, and he's like, "Wait a minute, there's something here." He sits down with a notebook,
starts taking detailed notes on Peter Rabbit 2. But apparently, Patrick Burley's been announced for a couple of other films, including a new Power Rangers film. So apparently, he's made some waves. So good for him.
Good for him. Andrew, I think it's time that we jump into this movie.
I agree.
The Eternals are a group of 10 individuals with superhuman abilities that have protected humanity since the dawn of civilization from monstrous creatures called deviants. In the present day, the group has splintered, and each are secretly living normal lives among mortals, believing that the deviants have long since been eradicated. When a new, seemingly more powerful deviant surfaces, the Eternals band together one by one to face this new threat. After learning that their true nature is to guide the planet to its destruction and give life to a new celestial being, the group is fragmented once again between those that wish to carry out the mission and the others that want to save our planet. Truly an epic, globe-trotting, history-spanning movie we have here. Like, no joke, thousands of years are covered in this movie.
Yes, I agree. I agree. No,
that is factually correct, Chris. Yes.
But yeah, a big scope here, especially a pretty large scope for a new property. This movie is asking a lot of the audience for everything that it's covering, and yeah, it's deep.
But I honestly, hashtag positivity podcast. Let's jump into the positives. I love that. I love that Marvel is taking a swing. It's easy to say, like I mentioned earlier, like Marvel movies, they print money. They're guaranteed to be successful. That's not all entirely true. It is still very much a risk to make a movie with 10 characters that the mainstream has never heard of and a story that's completely detached from the, Avengers universe of characters that we've grown to love. You could say that, Iron Man was a risk because that wasn't a very high profile character at the time, or even Captain America. But looking back, I mean, now, of course, they're household names, but compare those characters to the Eternals, and it's pretty wild. And I like that they're continuing to do this. Guardians was definitely a big swing at the time. Those were a group of characters we never heard of, and they're sort of doubling down on that risk. Like, let's span an even greater distance. Let's go even more cosmic. Let's get more characters people never heard of. And I like that. A big criticism thrown at the MCU as a whole is people like to say that they're made in a factory or cookie cutter. And I can see some of those complaints, but you've got to give credit where credit is due. I think that this was a ambitious project to put forward.
Oh, no, absolutely. 100% ambitious, 100%. Probably, I would say, a far deeper swing than Guardians was. Like, Guardians, as off the wall as it is, there's still, like, very human things to attach to, if only with Peter Quill's arc and his character and his performance. There's still
and love of 70s popular music.
Exactly. That movie had a lot going for it. Whereas, like, I'm one of the biggest Jack Kirby fans you're going to meet. And even I, like, hearing this, thought it was a very strange choice. Like, the Eternals are something that, like, Marvel comes back to, like, every decade, at least for a long time. I know lately they've been involving them more just through, like, events that they've been having, and they've been members of the Avengers in the past. But, like, by and large, the Eternals have always kind of been their own thing. They dust them off. Like, I know, obviously, there's the original Jack Kirby run, and then, like, Neil Gaiman has a run with them. There's a run with them in the 80s. Like, it's a very strange thing that it sometimes doesn't even feel like Marvel is entirely sure what to do with. But we can talk more about the comics later. But either way, a very, very auspicious swing here to go with the Eternals.
And they assembled one hell of a cast to pull this off. So that's what we're going to jump into first, go through the casting and performances of this movie. And you know what we're going to do. We're going to start at the high point with the best casting, the best performance of the movie. We always highlight one person who goes above and beyond what's being asked of them to elevate the quality of the entire film, or at least elevate the role that they were given. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. I am so excited to hear who you pick for this, because I had a very tough time nailing this one down. There's a lot of standout performances in my opinion, but Andrew, start us off. Who gets your Mark Strong Award for Eternals?
It is Mahershala Ali's uncredited voice cameo as Blade. His one line of dialogue.
He delivered it so well. It left such an impact on me.
You don't even see his face.
Wesley, who?
You don't even see his body. No, just having a little fun there, folks. Hashtag positivity podcast. But this might be an odd choice given some of the things the script does with the character, but I got to go with Kumail Nanjiani as Kingo, as my Mark Strong. Every scene he's in, I'm having a good time with it. Every performance he does, the humor he brings with his valet, like all of that. Like I love everything he's doing, and it makes the movie that much more enjoyable to me. And it's a bummer that he is not included in the big final fight, but like otherwise, like everything about him, I'm just having fun while he's on screen. I think he's got a really good grasp on how he wanted to bring this character to life, and I think he was a great choice. I like almost everything he's in, even stuff like Stuber with fellow MCU star Dave Bautista.
Even stuff like Stuber? What do you mean even stuff like Stuber, Andrew?
Stuber was another one that had a mixed critical reception. That's all I'm saying.
I actually didn't see it. Is it genuinely... Be real with me, Andrew. Is it a movie I have to see? Is it hilarious? What are we looking at here?
I mean, I wouldn't say you have to see it, but if like you want to watch something that's, if you're looking for like a good solid 100 minutes of enjoyable fun time with a new movie you haven't seen before, then sure.
I do love Camille and Big Dave, so it sounds
it can't go wrong. But otherwise, yeah, I like hearing, and especially how like all the actors in this movie were pretty passionate about it. Like you hear them talk about like the diverse cast, the stuff they were bringing to the screen for the first time in some cases. There was a lot of people that were very, in the cast, that were just very on board with bringing this all to life, and just hearing some of the stuff he was talking about when he was talking about like watching like Errol Flynn films, some of the original Zorro films, and like all these pieces he was trying to bring together for the character. I just ended up having a really good time when he was on screen. From his introduction, where he's basically playing Icarus in like a Bollywood film about him, to like the fight scenes where he gets to kind of jump in on the action. And then, like I said, the stuff with his valet Varun is just, I'm laughing every time. It's hilarious to me. Varun's endless cameras that they keep commenting on. But yeah, so if I'm gonna point to somebody that I kept coming back to as probably my favorite part of the cast, I'm going with Kumail as Kingo.
I think that's an excellent pick. I think at the risk of going to walk with me, it's going to sound like a backwards compliment at first, but
okay,
he brings some much needed levity and humor to this movie. Without his character, this movie runs the risk of being way too self-serious and melodramatic, and especially with this long runtime, you've got to spice it up a little bit. You've got to have some humor. So he's playing a very important role in this movie and just making it feel complete and fleshed out and have some variety amongst the characters. And I think he excels at that. just like you, I love every minute that he's on screen. Every joke lands, in my opinion. He consistently makes me laugh. I love. You're right. He has such a good grasp on his character. Even that scene where they're filming that Bollywood dance scene, his facial expressions alone are like cracking me up. There's every little
He's so
raise
good.
of the eyebrow and cocking his jaw. It's so, yeah, perfect. On point. I love his sort of like diva persona as being a big Bollywood star. And just the the hilarity that he's been a movie star for over 100 years and just every now and then changes his identity from his
Yeah, he's just
great grandfather to grandfather to father. It's just nobody's
just created a dynasty for himself of like
Yeah.
Bollywood actors.
That is so funny to me. I also love that
It's all good.
his valet, because he says like very early on, whenever the other Eternals meet up with him, like we got to talk in private. He's like, no, whatever you say in front of me, you can say in front of him, and he's totally cool. He's like, oh yeah, he's an Eternal. Like he gets it. He's on board, and he's still like totally cool with being his valet, as they usually call him,
Yeah,
manager,
that's what
whatever,
they call him,
whatever, whatever he is to him. But yeah, man, I think it's a great pick. I also love that his superpower is finger guns. He just points with his fingers and shoots little blasters. Super fun. He had to have had fun doing that on set.
Who wouldn't? I know I would.
Not who I'm going for the Mark Strong Award, but definitely someone that I was really thinking about. And going into this movie, into the second viewing, that's the direction I thought I would go. But after watching this movie a second time, if I'm being honest with myself, there's one performance that I think is just genuinely so good, and they do so much with so little. I'm giving my Mark Strong Award to Angelina Jolie as Thena. And when I say she does so much with so little, I don't mean like she has very small screen time. She gets a decent amount of time, but she has just occasionally one line or one look that just says so much about her character. I mean, we've got 10 characters plus. There's 10 Eternals plus a supporting cast fighting for screen time and fighting for developing their character. She is so good. She's so efficient at it that she comes across. So you finish this movie, you've got like this full grasp of who this character is, what they've been through and their pain, and she conveys it so well. Angelina Jolie isn't. I haven't always loved like her movies. I haven't always been like the biggest Angelina Jolie fan. I've kind of like been fine, just
sure, yeah.
Digestible action movies is kind of what I think of when I think of her career. But this movie, it really shows that she is like a veteran actress, and like there's a reason she is so high profile because she is just so good. So she's got a few shades to her character. First, she's Athena. She's presumably the inspiration for the goddess Athena, who is a Greek god of wisdom and warfare. And so she has like this affinity for fighting, and she's just intrinsically a badass character. But she's not. She displays that with such confidence. She's not screaming, yelling for bloodshed. She just is confident that she can kill anything. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Like, and she conveys it, like I said, so well, like one line. During one of the fights and one of the flashbacks, she says, "There was more deviants than you said." And Gilgamesh is like, "Well, I'm sure that was a lot of fun for you." And she says, "It was." Just so confidently. And I love those little moments, and I just kept finding them throughout the movie. But her character has the tragic side because she is, I mean, we don't need to get the whole explanation right now, but essentially her character has, we could say, dementia is sort of a parallel we could relate it to. But she's kind of losing her grasp on reality and her memories at time. And it's very tragic because whenever she gets into a kind of foggy state, she sort of resorts to violence and attacks her friends, and she has to be sort of calmed down and brought back to reality, usually by Gilgamesh, and they have a very sweet relationship in this movie. It's definitely a high point of the characters. But lastly, she has got a good final fight with the big bad deviant that I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite action scenes in the movie. So the range that she shows from action, badass, to vulnerable, hurt person is I'm on board for it. I think she absolutely kills it. Angelina Jolie, Mark Strong Award.
I think that's a great choice, and that's actually something that I was definitely going to bring up when we talked about the characters. This is a very subtle performance, but there's a lot of layers to it. And I think it comes off really well. I think you are, like you said, you get a lot with, it's not to say she's not in the movie a lot, but she makes the most of every single scene. I like there's a scene where she's fighting Icarus. And says something, I don't remember what the exact line is, but it's like Icarus is like, you can't beat me. And she's like, oh, but I've always wanted to try. Something like that, where she's like, the thrill of fighting Icarus, who's supposed to be like the most powerful of the Eternals, that's a challenge to her that she's like grateful for. And so stuff like that, you're right. There's a lot going on there, and it's all pretty good.
He says, you never had to fight me. And she says, but I've always wanted to.
And then you get Superman versus Wonder Woman, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The whole time I'm watching this, I'm just like, someone was really upset they never cast Angelina Jolie as Wonder Woman, weren't they? But beyond that, it's still really good.
In this ensemble cast, she's arguably the most high profile. I mean, I think she kind of objectively is, I guess, now that I think about it. So, Salma Hayek is up there, but Angelina Jolie was definitely turning heads when she was cast in an MCU movie. And they don't, it almost would have been easy for her to like steal scenes in a selfish way. Not that I'm claiming she would do that, but the filmmakers to overly focus on her and her character and steal every, badass moment or every pivotal character moment. But she really blends into the ensemble in a great way. And whenever it's her time to shine, she's always up to the task. She's fantastic. I really liked it.
I agree.
Gemma Chan plays Cersei. Again, it's an ensemble cast, but this is basically our lead of the movie, and becomes the leader of the Eternals throughout the course of the movie and is very pivotal in the climax of the film. Her casting is notable because she has already been in the MCU. It's very rare that they use an actor in more than one role, but she was in Captain Marvel, and her character there, I think, is Minerva, is blue. So I guess you can kind of get away with, having her play another character.
Yeah. She was that was based off, I think, Dr. Minerva, who was one of the many, many cosmic characters in the MCU. But yeah, I can't even pretend that when they were like, they're casting her as somebody else, I was like, oh no. Like, I didn't even realize. Like, it's not something I think they're going to go back on as far as bringing back Minerva. So I think they're in the clear.
Yeah. I hope Josh Brolin shows up as a human at some point in the MCU. You sound awfully familiar, sir. But I like her in this movie. She's got her kind of whole role. Like I said, she becomes the leader, and she's kind of questioning if she is up to the task, if she can lead this team and make the right decision and overcome the great threat and stop the celestial being from destroying the planet. So a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure on her shoulders that she struggles with throughout the movie, but ultimately rises to the occasion. I think my favorite scenes of hers as far as the performance are actually not even dealing with that. I like her more lighthearted scenes. I like her with her boyfriend in the present day, who we'll get to that character, but sort of just trying to live her life as a mortal. I think she's really charming there. And then even at the end of this movie, after she's gone through everything, there's a brief scene of her in the park, which kind of gets to relax a little bit. And I like those kind of scenes of levity versus her maybe action scenes or mental anguish scenes.
Right. No, I agree. She definitely plays with that. She gets thrust into this role of leadership, and she's not sure if she's prepared for it. But even more so, she's struggling with the reality of the mission, which is kind of one of the big twists in the film. Is basically the Eternals were ever only supposed to allow a new Celestial to be born, and the planet is destroyed after that, including whoever's on it. And they all kind of get split over this. And so she's kind of put in this position of like, not just am I now leading this group, I'm now realizing that the mission is not what I thought it was. And so she gets a lot of weight added to her shoulders. But I do agree. I think the human stuff, if you want to call it that, is where she kind of shines, especially like with the boyfriend on Earth, Kit Harington, we'll talk about more later. But like all that stuff when they're kind of interacting and she's kind of contrasting even some of the Eternal stuff with the real world. I think that all is pretty fun. And I think that's where she feels most relaxed in the role. Yeah.
Richard Madden plays Icarus.
Superman.
His powers is that he's very strong, he can fly, and he can shoot lasers out of his eyes. It's really not even being coy about him being Superman. There's a reference to it in the movie. That is, I gotta imagine, even in the comics when they created the character, it was very clearly modeled after Superman.
Yeah, I mean, the cover, like, if you look at pictures of Icarus is one of the first Eternals revealed in the comic. He's in Eternals #1, whereas a lot of these characters come in later over the course of it. But, like, yeah, he wears a blue suit that has prominent red insignias on it. And, like, yeah, it's Jack Kirby, and he knew what he was doing, but you can't pretend for a second he didn't know he was basically aping Superman for that.
You could literally compare his performance here to Henry Cavill, to Brandon Routh, to anybody that's played Superman.
Well, I mean, Chloe Zhao even said that the take on Icarus in this movie was inspired by Man of Steel, and it showed.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of DNA here from previous Superman performances, and honestly, there was probably a time I wouldn't be shocked if Richard Madden had actually auditioned for Superman at some point. Wouldn't shock me at all. He might have been in the list for Man of Steel. Who knows? But yeah, very clearly drawing some lines.
Yeah,
there.
I mean, he's got the draw for it. This is like
got the hair for it.
What, Irish Superman? What's that accent he's got there? Scottish. Excuse me.
How dare you?
Now, another performance I absolutely love in this movie is Leah McHugh as Sprite. She has a very interesting side story and character arc. She looks very young. And honestly, watching this movie the first time, I was like, how old is this actress? Do they cast somebody in their 20s and age them down? Do they just naturally look younger? Do they cast someone that's very young? This actress was born in 2005. So shooting the movie, she would have been 15, 14, 15.
Maybe.
I mean,
yeah.
But you can't tell watching this movie. She does such a good job at portraying an old soul in a young body, which is extremely hard to do. I always go back to Kirsten Dunst and Interview with the Vampire. She does that extremely well, and there's been plenty of other performances that I've kind of tried to pull this off and failed. But I watch this movie and I do not see like a little kid. Like, I buy that she is a peer of the other Eternals, and towards the end of the movie she has a big impassioned speech about what it's been like to be stuck in this body in a world of people that age and look at her differently because of the body that she's in. And it's such an interesting wrinkle to the character and to the story. And Leah, I've got to imagine, I looked at filmography, not too many credits so far. Obviously she's very young, early in her career, but I expect there's going to be a lot of roles ahead of her, a lot of success ahead of her, because this is really a fantastic performance.
I agree. She gets one of the more human stories, I think, human such as it is, but she's got this genuine kind of frustration at their situation only because she's stuck looking like a child. She's been a child for essentially 7,000 years at this point, even longer when you look at it. And so she's can't experience all these things because she's stuck looking like a child. And there's been a few things that have dealt with that kind of story before. But she does that all extremely well. She, like you said, that weariness, that agedness to the character, none of it, it's all present. None of it feels like it got missed. None of it feels like, this character's supposed to be 7,000 years old, but it doesn't feel like it. So it really is a fantastic performance to really get all that across authentically. And yeah.
Brian Tyree Henry plays Phastos. Confusingly, not the Eternal, with super speed.
No.
That would have been 2 on the nose.
Well, what's interesting is that Phastos is one of the only Eternals in this film who is not from the original run of Eternals by Jack Kirby. The original run of Jack Kirby is what introduces Makari, who runs fast, and then Phastos comes later. So, yeah, I don't know why a person creating an Eternal later would decide to call somebody Phastos when there's already one that goes fast, but You'd have to ask Peter B. Gills about that one.
I mean, he should have been Engineeros, right? Builderos.
Yes.
Because that's his ability. Be able to the power of technology. He's got a pretty interesting, legitimately a superpower I don't think I've ever seen before.
Yeah, I agree. It's portrayed very cool, like the visuals they use for it, the kind of all the Eternals technology in this all has a kind of very cool look to it that I really like. But yeah, the way he kind of pulls things apart, can look at them all together. It's like what Tony Stark does with all of his AI stuff, where he can like pull things apart, put them back together. But the technology and the things he's doing it with are so much more deep and involved, and sometimes very otherworldly in what they are and what they're doing. So it makes it it makes it very different. So you're not seeing just the same thing.
Yeah, and a theme throughout the casting in this movie, it's going to be two things. One is some departures from the source material with what they do with the characters. And most of those changes are in service and pursuit of making a diverse cast in a film that represents the world that we actually live in, which makes a lot of sense for Eternals because, I mean, they're not heroes from America. They predate countries altogether. So it makes sense for them to sort of represent the world as a whole and not any central region. And in the case of this character, Fastos, to my knowledge, it's the first openly gay character in the MCU. And I know for a fact that it's the first time that has been depicted very openly. I mean, there's they share a kiss on screen in a very sweet moment, and it's dealt with extremely well because it's just very matter of fact. And his family is the reason that he sort of connects again to humanity in the first place. One of my favorite things they do with this character is they show him at Hiroshima after the bomb has gone off, and he is just devastated that humans have perverted the technology that he helped them create to make such an evil, disastrous weapon. And he completely loses faith in humanity and decides these people aren't even worth saving. And then we get like a smash cut to him working on his son's bike and living like a suburban life with his husband. And it's super sweet. I love that transition to, him finding love. And that's what grounds him back to humanity again. It's very cool, very well done.
Yeah, extremely well done. I think this is I like this performance a lot. If there had been a little bit more to it, he probably would have been in the running for Mark Strong. But he's a guy he's very comfortable with the character. He also adds some of that levity that is there with Kingo, but he's got a bit more of a sardonic sense of humor, but it still helps. And that's one thing with this cast too, is like you definitely buy that most of them feel like old acquaintances, like at bare minimum. Like they all feel like they've known each other a long time.
They love each other, but they bicker.
Like all the scenes where they're kind of all in a group, especially as they all start getting back together, like that dinner scene when they get to Thena and Gilgamesh, like where they're all just sitting around almost reminiscing, like they feel like old friends. And I think that's something that in a movie like this is not the easiest thing to pull off, because there's definitely been ensemble movies where you watch everybody together and you're like, I don't buy any of this, but you can mostly buy it here. They feel like there's a long history with all of them, and his relationship with the characters is no exception.
Lauren Ridloff plays Makari. Now this is the Eternal with super speed. So, parallels to Flash or Quicksilver, any other superhero that we've seen that can run super fast, that is her power. And again, in a deviation from the comics, originally this character is a white hearing man. I guess that's how you word that. Whereas here it's played by a woman of color who is deaf, and the actress herself is deaf. So that's something that, because of her casting, was brought into the character itself. And I absolutely love seeing these heroes on screen just break into sign language whenever they communicate with her. It is super cool. And again, it's one of those things that is just seamless, and it is what it is. It doesn't need to be a point of conflict or contention in the movie. Her character is deaf. That's it.
Yep. I like this was something they also did in Hawkeye pretty well.
Oh yeah.
When Echo was on screen, characters would just shift into sign language, including Hawkeye, and even, I don't know if I should spoil Hawkeye or not. But like several of the characters, they just jump into sign language, even if it's some very limited, but I think that's cool. It obviously, like you said, it's not a point of contention. That's just how that's how these people speak, and that's what it is.
I like this character's sort of almost playful nature. She never, whenever everybody's out living their lives, she's just like chilling in the ship, like waiting for their mission to be done and
stealing stuff.
Yeah, the stuff and art and toys and stuff that she has around the ship really inform who the character is.
Yeah.
She has a sweet relationship with Droog where they sort of, I don't think it's really romantic, but they just have a special bond, unique just to the two of them. And again, going back to how all these characters, this cast is all like friends, I've known each other for a long time. There's definitely some romances that pop up, but they don't ship them all off, to use the language of Zoomers. Am I using that right? They're not all intimate relationships. Some of them are just closer bonds or unique friendships, and that is just super cool. I know this actress first came into prominence on The Walking Dead, season 9. I can't say I've seen her in that. I've seen the first, 4 or 5 seasons of that show. I didn't make it to season 9, but she is still a regular on the show as far as I know. She actually took some time off from season 10 to shoot this movie. So, man, she is killing it. I love it.
She's also in a movie I really liked. I may have mentioned it on the show before, but it's called The Sound of Metal. It's about a drummer played by Riz Ahmed. I probably mentioned this on our Venom episode, but she plays a teacher who helps the main character in that movie learn ASL as he's starting to lose his hearing while playing music and trying to come to terms with that. And so, yeah, another cool performance that she's got.
Very cool. Barry Keoghan plays Droog or Druig. You and I are arguing about how to pronounce this, but he plays the Eternal with the ability to manipulate people's minds and basically kind of puppet their bodies and take control of them.
Yeah, a power that does not help him against the deviants. But yeah, this is he's definitely the one that became kind of aloof and kind of disengaged from humanity. Was kind of like, you're not letting me help them. I'm watching them kind of gets to the place that Fastos does before, where he kind of is like, this is a pointless effort trying to save humanity because they'll just destroy themselves. So he gets brought back in for a variety of reasons. Mainly his whole village gets attacked by the deviants. But I've seen Barry in a lot of things, a lot of independent films, Killing of a Sacred Deer, The Green Knight, also a little film called Dunkirk.
That's where I know him. Yeah, that is
small indie called Dunkirk. But
I've seen this, heard of this.
You seen this? Heard of this? Also, will be in the upcoming The Batman, playing Stanley Merkel. So we will. Popular fan theories suggest he might be the Joker, but we'll see about that. Okay. But yeah, so either way, this performance is interesting. He's meant to be kind of the big focal point at the end, but he hands that off to Cersei after Icarus plows him halfway into the planet. But yeah, he's got a bit of a sarcastic look on everything. And yeah, I like this performance. He's one of the more limited performances here, but I think he's good nonetheless.
Barry, this dude has an interesting face, doesn't he? Just an interesting look to him. He looks like a Hergé character. He looks like a character from the Adventures of Tintin comic, like brought to life. Like he just has these features that look like a comic strip. That is not an insult to me. Good looking dude, but unique looking. I'll say that.
Yes, I think that's a nice way of saying it. He does. He looks like a Tintin comic. I can't get over it. But yeah, I like the performance. I think it's because we do get a lot of different. Because there's some that like Cersei loves humanity. Like that's part of like her thing. She's fully integrated into it. She's on her phone like the whole movie. Like there's a big awkward moment when like her ringtone is like a Lizzo song, and everyone's like, "What?" And but he's one of the ones that is more disengaged, not necessarily for his own well-being, but just because he's kind of done with it. And it's all, really well done.
Don Lee plays Gilgamesh.
This dude rules, man.
I love this character. I love this actor. My Mark Strong Award went to Angelina Jolie for her role as Thena, and the two characters are definitely linked in this movie. When the group splinters, they go off together as a pair. And they're another, like, partnership that's not really romantic. At least it's not explicitly romantic. It's more just a very deep friendship and understanding and companionship that is so sweet and so well done. And another contender for my Mark Strong Award. He's got some very good scenes we'll talk about here in a minute, but I just love the performance overall. I love the casting. This quote from Don Lee about us casting this role was very cool that I read here in an interview. He said, "Once I read for the character of Gilgamesh, I knew that it was perfect for me. Director Chloe Zhao and Marvel molded the character to fit me. In fact, Gilgamesh isn't even an Asian character. They changed the character to suit me. They knew that I had boxed for a long time, so they changed the action to hand-to-hand combat. I was really touched that they were so considerate and made the character to fit me." And that is super cool. His power is essentially that he can punch really hard. He's got like these, the energy gloves that he uses to punch things with great force or stop things with his hands. And he's a boxer in real life. Like, I had no idea that's how that power came about. I definitely assumed that was from the comics, but it's so cool that it's like they cast great actors from around the world first, and they made sure that the role made sense for them. And the end result is that the high point of this movie, the best part of the movie, to me, is the characters and just how well done they are, how real they feel and developed they are.
Yeah, I agree. That's actually something I was going to bring up if you hadn't, was just, I really do like the Gilgamesh-Thena relationship, because basically when Thena has her kind of, I forget what they call it, like the mod weary or something, I think that's how it's said, but I mean, what it ends up being is she's remembering their past lives, and it's causing this like conflict within her mind of who she is and what she's doing. So she has this big final kind of breakdown where she fights and hurts several of the other Eternals, and they finally bring her back, but the group is fracturing at this point. Gilgamesh is like, I'm going to take care of Thena. And it's not, like you said, it's not some like, I love Thena and I will do that. Like it is, but like it's not in a romantic way. It's much more in like I fear like somebody needs to take care of you and I'm going to do that because why wouldn't I do that? Not expecting anything in return, not expecting a higher relationship or anything like that. But just like you said, there's a millennia old friendship here that he is jumping on to make sure that she's okay. And there's something this is the one relationship in the movie that really stood out to me just because of how it's played, how it's performed. And when he unfortunately passed, it's definitely one of the moments in the movie where I was like, oh no, oh no, these are feelings. Stop it. But, and Don Lee is awesome. And I know this is really cool because he's a Korean actor, generally speaking, mostly appeared in Korean films. One of my favorites, Train to Busan. I don't know if you've seen that, Chris.
I own it. I haven't watched it. Everyone says I need to. I will get on that soon.
He's awesome in it. And he's got a very, like, his performance is, again, it's very layered. He gets to play with his boxing stuff. This dude's just straight up boxing zombies. And it's awesome. Maybe not the best method of assault against zombies, but he covers his hands. But he's really great in that. He's got another great relationship that he's the core of, and it's, again, when you're very invested in his character. So he's somebody that if you have a chance to check out the stuff he's in, even if it's stuff from Korea, he's almost always great in it. And his performance here is no exception. Like I said, he gets to build this relationship with Thena, feels authentic. You sense that he cares about this character and he's worried about this character. Like, he's very invested in making sure that she's okay. And so he's awesome. You can go a lot. You can take a lot worse turns in life than checking out all of Don Lee's filmography. All of it.
All right, home stretch on the cast here. Our last Eternal, Selma Hayek, plays Ajak, the leader of the Eternals. And the way I see it is like she's the mother, the sort of her role. Not so much a leader in a military sense, but one that cares for them and helps guide them and set them on a path to integrate with the world, take care of the world, learn from the world. There's a lot going on there, but I think it's fantastic casting. I love this soft side of Selma Hayek, this very motherly, maternal side. I think she plays it so well. Not a ton of screen time, a few key scenes, mainly flashbacks, but I think that, again, that maternal relationship comes across strongly every single time she's on screen. Even whenever her quote-unquote kids sort of start to question her or yell at her, she approaches them with understanding and love and caring, and not anger or resentment. And it's very nice, very well done.
It is, and she's the one that kind of she's their de facto leader. She's the one that has the biggest. She's the one that directly communicates with Erisham, who is the celestial that they are all essentially reporting to. Also known as Erisham the Judge. Gotta wonder if that's going to come back later. But he talks to her directly, and she's the one that has the doubts about the mission here first. And that ultimately leads to essentially the events of this movie kicking off. So she's the one that is kind of like, this place is different. This is not just a celestial being born, but she's like, these people, Thanos wiped out half of humanity, and these people brought them back. Like, you can't, these aren't just anyone. These people are special. These people can't just be gotten rid of.
Well, Thanos wiped out half of life in the universe, specifically. Right. So they were fighting for more, which
delayed the emergence.
Yeah.
Right. So a hugely selfless action to save half the universe. And, and maybe there was some mildly selfish motivations, but, I'm not going to complain. But yeah, so she's the one that kind of gets that moment of like, we can't let this place be gotten rid of. And obviously Icarus, who doesn't like that, basically ends up kicking off the movie's events by essentially throwing her to the deviants. But I do like the performance a lot. There's not a lot here. Her on the horse is the only shot you saw from this movie going in. That was her riding the horse up to her house. Yeah, that's fairly the only clip you'd seen.
I was sold, man. I gotta see that.
Oh, it's Selma Hayek on a horse. That's all I need.
Hey.
But yeah, I like the performance. Like you said, not a whole lot here. Really just some key scenes, but they're powerful scenes. They're effective scenes. She's a big part of that scene where they all split and they all kind of go their separate ways. And so, yeah, I like it a lot. It's definitely different. Like, if you watch her and say like the Hitman's Bodyguard or the Hitman's Bodyguard's wife or whatever, Desperado, you get a lot more manic energy at times. With this, it's very reserved, very, like you said, there's a maternal aspect to the role, which is honestly interesting that she was kind of hesitant to work with Marvel, assuming that she would have a role like that. And that's kind of what this role ends up being. But it's very effective, and it's very important for the relationship with these characters. So I think, yeah, pretty good.
All right, 2 non-Eternal castings really quick. First off, Harish Patel plays Karun. Kingo's...
the greatest actor of all time.
Greatest actor of all time. Kingo's valet / manager / steals almost every scene he gets to speak in. It's very good.
Yeah,
he's so
good.
Sweet. I love...
He is. He's so good.
I love whenever they all, as a group, find out what's happening, that the Celestial is going to wake up and kill Earth. Kingo tries to let him out of his contract. He's like, the Earth is ending. You need to go home. And he goes, and do what? Watch TV? What do I do? Now that I have this knowledge the Earth is ending, you think I'm just going to leave? This is now the most important, most interesting thing. Yeah, he's always filming what's going on, making the documentary with Kingo. It's very good.
The scenes with him and Kingo are probably my favorites in the whole movie, just because Kingo's always doing these intense narrations over the footage that he's filming, and they're always ridiculous. His cameras keep getting destroyed, and he keeps pulling out another one. It's like he's got a backup and then a backup to the backup. It doesn't matter at all.
Whenever he sees a dead deviant, he's like, oh, it's a beautiful creature. And Kingo's like, what? That's not beautiful. What are you talking about?
Yeah, he's a small part of it, but he's very memorable, stands out, makes the most of every scene he's in. Like you said, arguably steals every scene he's in. But yeah, really good stuff.
Lastly, Kit Harington is in this movie. Probably most known for playing Jon Snow and Game of Thrones. Andrew, how many times has Game of Thrones come up on this podcast? Considering we say the same thing every time. I feel bad because we're always like, hey, I know it's a popular show. Haven't really watched it. My brother, my older brother, who listens to the show, thank you, Josh, is a huge Game of Thrones fan. And anytime like we casually just like bring it up and dismiss it, he's like, go watch the show. It's so good. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not into like elves and dragons.
Fantasy.
And he's like, there's no elves in there. I'm like, I don't know.
He's not even the first Game of Thrones actor in this movie. Richard Madden's in it too.
Oh yeah, I don't even know. I don't know. I just know.
blew right past that.
I know Jon Snow. Like as someone who never watched it,
right.
I know who Jon Snow is. I know he's a big deal. Fighting dwarves and leprechauns or whatever they're doing over there. But
Richard Madden plays Robb Stark, who's like sounds important.
I don't know. I don't want to keep
him.
I'm probably pissing my brother off and other fans of Game of Thrones. But anyway, the point is, the reason we're talking about this performance, because there's not a lot of screen time, but presumably this is important casting for the future of the Marvel Universe. He is playing Dane Whitman. Now, comic book expert Andrew, please briefly describe why that is important.
Dane Whitman becomes known primarily as a character called the Black Knight. He is a character who is exactly what he sounds like. He is a knight who wears black armor. He uses a sword called the Ebony Blade, and even for a time wielded Excalibur. And the Ebony Blade is a powerful enchanted weapon that it's got so many weird, ridiculous qualities.
Now, does this character exist like in modern times alongside Captain America and Iron Man, or is he like a period piece comic book?
No, there is a line of Black Knights. The Ebony Blade is passed from person to person. So the Black Knight has been around a long time, and yes, the current version is typically a contemporary. There is a really, really great comic called Captain Britain in the MI-13. Black Knight and Captain Britain and a whole bunch of others end up being members of MI-13 during what is Secret Invasion. So it starts off with them fighting Skrulls, but then they eventually end up fighting Dracula on the moon, who has a ship that launches vampires at their ship in space, and it's essentially the greatest comic of all time. And nobody read it, and it lasted like 13 issues, and then it was canceled. And I was like, guys, this is the greatest comic ever published in the history of comics, and none of us are reading it. But they fight Dracula and stuff. It's awesome. But yeah, so Black Knight also gets some weird up. Like at one point, he wears like a black helmet with like a leather jacket and his sword and stuff. He gets a bunch of different looks. But yeah, so obviously, I would assume he's going to be a big part of the more mystical side of things, possibly the supernatural side of things.
Okay, well, you mentioned he fights Dracula. I think that's maybe
draw your conclusions there, folks.
We'll come back to that when we talk about that post-credit scene. But for now, let's talk about all the other scenes in the movie that we really like, starting with our favorite scene in the movie. Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Eternals?
I think the scene I'm going to go with is the fight at Droog's village. I think this is our first kind of instance where we're seeing a large amount of the group of Eternals all kind of in action. We see what a lot of them can do in a crisis, and then we also get Gilgamesh's death, which is one of the most emotional moments in the movie for me, just because, like I said, that relationship between Thena and Gilgamesh was probably, of all the relationships between the characters outside Kingo and Karun, because you can't top that, folks. But it's so, at that point, I think that's my favorite scene. This is the scene where we're starting to get an idea that this kind of, I think Crow is the name of the big deviant they're fighting. There's more to him than we realize. We see that he's got the ability to take the Eternals' powers while he kills them, so he's evolving and changing and getting more powerful. We get everybody kind of doing their thing. Cersei is in the thick of it, with Icarus being not Superman. Kingo getting in on the fight too with all of his finger guns and everything. It's all really cool. You get to see all of them and using their powers in what is essentially like a group setting, which you see a little bit in the flashback stuff, like in Babylon and things like that. But with the modern context, I think with the added stuff with Gilgamesh, this is probably my favorite scene.
It's a very good action scene. It's interesting. I'm thinking back on this movie. I don't think there's a single action scene where we see every single Eternal fighting. The final conflict, they're not all there. And here in the village, we don't have Phastos or Makari yet. And Ajax, we almost never see fighting. So you see, like, during different action scenes, different combinations of characters. But we get a lot of them here, and a lot of their best action moments come here. You're right. We get a very emotional moment where Gilgamesh is killed, and he's killed defending and protecting Athena, which is, of course, very sweet and appropriate. She is having a moment of crisis, and her mind is splintering, and she's sort of paralyzed from dealing with that. And he steps in and gets killed in the process of defending her, and it is definitely very emotional. And you know that the rest of this movie, she is sort of living with that Gilgamesh met his demise defending her, and that is something that she has to carry on with her character, and it's that works very well, very solid there. Before the fight actually breaks out, there's also a few moments of levity here. Really, the whole village scene, which, are you saying the action scene's your favorite, or the whole village scene as a whole?
Just go with the whole thing.
Whole thing. It is a very memorable part of the movie. I love the concept. I love that whenever... I'm going with Druig, by the way. I'm going to double down on pronouncing it Druig. I love when Druig separates himself from humanity, that he sort of takes control of this village, but I don't know if he's manipulating their minds at all times, but he's certainly keeping them captive in some way. It's very, very strange, almost like a cult-like figure there, that he has like the self-sustaining village. I just like that concept as a whole. But I also like, they have trouble recruiting him at first. They kind of give him the whole pitch. Here's what's going on. And he's like, I'm not interested in any of that. Yeah. And that's where Kingo like straight up says, dude, Druig sucks.
Yeah.
Very good. And Karun is filming at one point, and Druig manipulates him and makes him throw the camera. And Kingo comes up. Okay, new rule, no more possessing people's valets. I love the specificity of that rule.
Yeah.
But yeah,
just the valets.
The action scene breaks out, and there's some huge standout moments there. Druig himself, who we kind of mentioned already, his power doesn't really help too much fighting deviants, but that doesn't stop him from getting in on the action. And there's a quick, maybe like 5-second shot that is just so cool, where he runs up the tail of the deviant with a shotgun, jumps in the air and blasts it, and the recoil like sends him spinning back down to the ground. He lands on his feet. Awesome. Just super
awesome.
Cool. That would work.
Just so awesome.
Yeah. Any action movie that would have worked. But it happens in a flash here. But that was definitely a huge standout. Icarus gets some awesome moments. He takes off flying. And him lifting up, a quick aside here. The physics in this movie, when it comes to the special effects and the CG replacements, are so good. Legitimately the best I've ever seen in a movie. Oftentimes, whenever a character, let's say, like Athena does, has to jump 20 feet in the air, you've got a few options. You can do a wire pull, which is cool. It's like the original X-Men, but it looks like a person on a wire. Or you can do like a CG assist, where maybe while they're flying through the air, there's CG, they land, they go back to being practical. That works as well, and I think that's what they're doing here, but usually it's a little obvious. The character looks rubbery for a little while, but the physics are just not right. The human eye is so good at detecting what is quote-unquote right and wrong. There's not really a science to it. It's like a feel. It is very hard to pull off. But anytime Athena jumps around, it looks perfect. When Icarus is standing there, and then he levitates and just takes off flying, it is seamless. It looks so good. Again, I'm not exaggerating. Best I've ever seen when it comes to the physics of these characters jumping far and flying. And I love his action scene. He's flying, and the deviant is flying as well. He literally slices off his wings with his laser eyes, which is awesome. And then he kills one of them by doing like a Godzilla 2014 kill. he opens up his jaws and shoots his lasers down his throat to sever his head.
Lasers down his face.
Awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. You're getting like the best of all of these characters. You see, at one point, Cersei turns the deviant into a friggin' tree.
Yeah,
like, it's just
that's cool.
It was awesome. I was like, this is awesome because it's one of the few fights too where like it's all of the Eternals versus a group of deviants. Like a lot of the conflicts in this movie are like several Eternals, like the one right at the beginning where Icarus reunites with Cersei and Sprite is them versus Crow. Like just Crow before he's complete. Also, shout out to Bill Skarsgård, who voices Crow once he gets the ability to do so.
Yeah, forgive me. Which one is Bill?
He's Pennywise from the new It movies.
Okay, he's Pennywise. And then his dad is also in the MCU in the Thor movies and Avengers.
Yes.
I think there's like, two more Skarsgårds we need to get into the MCU.
And then his brother is Tarzan.
All right. Yeah.
And was in Godzilla versus Kong. So there's plenty of people there's a whole Skarsgård clan that they can eventually all bring back around. But yeah, I was like, when he started talking, I was like, man, I know that voice. Because he starts talking at the end of this scene. Yeah. And I was like, man, who is that? I had to look it up. But I was like, nope, that's it. Definitely it. But yeah, the scene is great. And you get lots of cool action. You get some real Superman type stuff from Icarus here, where he kind of unleashes on some of these guys. You get cool stuff with Cersei, where like, and she's kind of shocked that she has the ability to turn this thing into a tree. She's never done that before. You got to wonder if that's going to come back at all.
And we should say, I guess, that I don't think we mentioned it. Her power is to touch something and change its matter.
What it's made of?
Yeah, it's hard to fit into words, I guess. But she touches a big truck at one point, turns it into rose petals, or she's explaining her power.
She gets stabbed at one point. She turns the knife into water. Like,
there you go.
It's stuff where it's like, this is really like, I guess, what would you call that? Transmutation?
Sure. But this is the first time she's been able to change a living thing, I guess. Yeah. It changed the matter of that.
Which, if you really think about it, a living thing is made up of stuff just like everything else is. So it's
yeah, Cersei. You ever think about your power before?
Yeah, Jesus. I don't even have powers, and I'm sitting here thinking about it. But and I've only been alive for 34 years. Not thousands.
You're the leader?
Ajax chose you? What? But yeah, this is probably, just a lot of good action, a lot of good stuff, development with the characters, development with the deviants, who at this point, we seen this guy start to evolve, and you see that he's got his own bone to pick with the Eternals and Erisham. And so, yeah, this is stand out to me.
Good action scene. The first time I saw this movie, I thought Icarus was going to die as well. Gilgamesh gets killed, and Icarus is really struggling. The foot of the deviant is holding his head down, and he's struggling to use his laser eyes or get out of it some way. And I thought we were going to lose another Eternal. So good tension in the action scenes as well.
Yep.
For my favorite scene, I chose something else, and I actually didn't go with an action scene. The action scenes are very well done. I like all of them. Special effects I've already praised, but when I really think about it, my favorite thing about this movie is the characters and their relationships with one another. And I think that is best displayed in Australia. So that's going to be my pick for best scene of the movie. So far in the story, we have Cersei, Sprite, Icarus, and Kingo, of course, with his valet. And they head out to Australia to reunite/recruit Gilgamesh and Thena, where they've been hanging out since the group splintered. And it is super sweet. For one, we get more of that relationship between Gilgamesh and Thena. I've got to imagine they chose to live like out in the outback, the wilderness of Australia, because there's no civilization around, no one for Thena to accidentally injure, and they kind of just live this quiet, peaceful life in a adobe and a hut, like a very, very humble little shack out there, living a quiet life. And
off
there's
the grid type stuff.
Yeah. And it starts off, they break the news to Gilgamesh that Ajax has died, and it is such I don't know if sweet's the right word. It's emotional. The way, because Gilgamesh gets built up as this brute force member of the Eternals, And then when we first see him, he's wearing an apron because he's cooking. He's making a pie with his like clay oven, and he's holding the pie like in the pan when they break the news to him, and he's just so distraught. And his arms just drop down, and the pie slowly slides out of the pan, and it's sad, but it's also like sweet that this person would be this vulnerable and show his emotions. I love that character, and I love that little moment for him. But then eventually they all gather around the table. They break bread together, as it were. They talk about their mission and the new revelation that they've come across just now. And they all kind of have their different reactions to it, as far as who's on board, who maybe wants to stop it, recruit the rest of them.
Mm-hmm.
And you just get nice like interplay between all the characters. Gilgamesh kind of teases Sprite, keeps calling her a child, which is a little mean, Gilgamesh, but that's kind of his...
Hey, come on, bud. Yeah.
He's a jokester, but for retaliation, she uses her ability to conjure illusions to put him like in a giant baby onesie with a bonnet on and everything. And I love this little bit. I noticed the second time through that his bib says Gilgamesh on it, and it's got like little stains on it. Nice little bit there. I love he serves everybody this ale, I guess, this beer that he's made, and Kingo like really likes it. He's drinking it up, and he's like, I could put my face on it, move some units for you. And that phrase, move some units, is like the most douchey line that he could possibly say, and he delivers it so well.
Yeah.
And of course, it's made out of corn that he chews up one at a time and ferments in his own spit, which is pretty gross to Kingo, and he spits it back out. It's just
I love later when Kingo like takes a drink of it and he's like, and he spits it right back out. He's like, stop serving us your saliva beer.
But yeah, it's a nice little. It's like the Avengers on the farm in Age of Ultron. It's just sort of a little quiet beat, but it's very important for developing these characters and the relationship with one another. And I could have used 10 more minutes there. Them in the shack, just hanging out, talking to each other, figuring this thing out. It is all very well done.
No, I agree. I think this scene is probably my second favorite of the whole film. And when you're talking about like character moments, I think you're right. I think this stands clear above everything else, because like outside Fastos, this is really like the first time a lot of these people have all been together in a long time, hundreds of years in some cases at this point. And like you said, all of that history is apparent. Like, that these are people that have known each other for a long time. And just the ribbing, the back and forth, the openness, all of it comes through. And I think it's very effective. And it's very good. It's like you said, you could have stayed here half the movie. And I mean, it would kill the pacing, but I probably wouldn't have had a problem with it. Like, because the characters being together creates that great chemistry. And yeah, I agree. Fantastic scene.
There's another great Angelina doing a lot with little moment where they're sort of openly discussing the troubles that she's having with her mind and what that means. And while they're talking about that, she is just deadlocked staring at Kingo's valet. And he looks over at her and she just has like a death stare as she slowly like takes a bite of food. And he's like, why is the crazy one looking at me? It's very good.
Yep.
That covers our favorite scenes. Now, over on the Discord, we did get a message about this movie. Phil from Missouri says, I really appreciate how different this movie was in its ideas and plot. Having the leading man type hero turn out to be an antagonist was genuinely surprising and cool. And I guess one of the big bads in the MCU is just kind of God now. Weird seeing it in a Disney movie, but I'm here for it. Thanks, Phil. And that is I haven't thought about it that way, but that is a take. I guess the celestial being. What is their full name? You said it earlier, Andrew.
Erisham. His name in the movie, he's only ever called Erisham, but in the comics, he's known as Erisham the Judge. Because in the comics, not the Eternals, the Celestials all have that kind of name. Like it's something. It's somebody the something. So he's Erisham the Judge, giant red dude. They're pretty on point with that portrayal there.
I mean, I often introduce myself as Chris the podcaster.
Yeah, and I introduce myself as Andrew the jerk. So it really does work. But yeah, I mean, really, he's like, he created the Eternals, he created the Deviants. Like, so yeah, like, what can't you do, really? Like, is there, like,
Judge is what he's best at, though. That's
right?
that's
And
what brings him joy. It's what sparks joy in his life. When he's judging, he's
yeah,
not really working because he loves it.
yeah, when he's creating life, he's just kind of bored. But yeah, he notably at the end of the film when they save the day, and stop the Celestial from being born out of the Earth, not entirely stopping it, but I really do hope that becomes like a weird monument in the MCU,
Yeah.
just the semi-emerged Celestial in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Also, that moment where there's like she jumps back down and like turns the whole thing into stone, I was like, all right, that's pretty dope. But
We'll get there.
we'll get there. But Arisham's, Arisham is not happy that they stopped this, so he comes and very notably says, I will
Judge.
come back and give my judgment of
Yeah.
Earth, essentially, which he's judged Earth like so many times. It's like, all right, man, just leave us alone. We clearly aren't the worst out there, so yeah.
Yeah, that is pending now, like in the MCU. At some point, we're gonna. I don't know if it's gonna be Eternals 2 or like Phil was saying here, like a big bad general, like a team up movie. I don't know, but it leaves that hanging over everybody's head. It's pretty.
Yeah, like how do you fight God essentially? It's gonna be a heck of a thing.
Thank you for writing in, Phil. And as always, if there is a comic book movie that you enjoy that was poorly received upon release, we want to know about it. Send us your positive thoughts and favorite performances. You can send us an email, bestoftherestpod@gmail.com, or just hop into our Discord like Phil. There is a link in the show notes. Check that episode description. We would love to see you there.
Yes, we would.
Andrew, my very first note when I was watching this movie is I love oddly shaped ships. Their spaceship is just a big
Triangle.
prism triangle. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's not aerodynamic, which I love because if you're in space, there's no air resistance. There's no reason to be aerodynamic. And I love any space movie that embraces that. It can be shaped like anything. It's going to move just as easily through the air. So yeah, they have this big, almost like a big Tetris piece that just kind of flies around. And I love that. Get weird with it. If we can have a spaceship like that, make it look like whatever you want.
Which brings us full circle back to Green Lantern, where you said the same thing about Abin Sur.
I did. Our very first episode. I guess we can hang up our hats now, huh?
I think we're done.
Yeah.
I think we're finished.
This was
All
a
right,
good
folks.
run.
We all right, good run. All right. No, I do like that. Like I said, I like the look of the technology a lot because it feels like we're trying to find that middle ground. Like, because Thor Ragnarok very notably used a lot of Kirby-inspired designs, like all the bright colors, all the wacky, lines, designs, everything, because that fit the aesthetic of that movie. Whereas with this, like some of that stuff being straightforward and in these bright, vibrant colors may have been a little jarring, but through stuff like Arishem and the ship and the suits and everything, you still get the DNA of the Kirby stuff, but you get it presented in a way that's a little bit more palatable to the tone of the movie without kind of stripping all of the creativity away from it. And the ships are definitely part of that. So ironically enough, that ship is called the Domo, which is actually named after a different member of the Eternals.
Oh, not the Japanese character that's like a brown SpongeBob with sharp teeth?
Yeah. No,
Not
it's
him?
not quite drawn it there. But yeah, so Domo was like the head technologist in Olympia, because that actually is a place in the comics. The history between the Eternals and the Celestials is a little bit different in the comics, a lot different. But in the film, they kind of give the technology stuff all the Phastos, and the ship is just called the Domo as a tribute to that character.
That is neat. Now, Andrew, I assumed for this rewatch you watched the movie on Disney Plus, yeah?
No, I actually found a VHS bootleg.
Okay. All right,
had to
smart
use-
guy.
I'm kidding,
All
folks.
right.
I'm kidding. I watched it on Disney Plus.
This
like
was
a normal person.
This was my first time watching an IMAX enhanced movie on the platform. I had heard about this for a while. So the aspect ratio will change throughout the movie. Mostly
Does
for
it?
did you not see this? You don't notice this, Andrew? During like action scenes, because it's presented in like letterbox format. You've got black bars top and bottom, but during key scenes and action set pieces, it changes to a full 16:9. It fills up your entire screen. So the first time I ever noticed this was probably watching The Dark Knight at home. because that movie was shot partially with IMAX cameras. And so to replicate that during the IMAX shots, they fill up your entire screen, 16:9 ratio. Now,
Interesting.
I don't know what the logic is here because it wasn't shot with actual IMAX cameras, but it was released at IMAX, formatted that way. So I'm not sure how they're making the decision as far as when to switch to IMAX, but it was cool and it was a neat way to experience the movie. So Andrew, keep an eye out for it if you watch it again. But
Yeah, I
anyone
guess,
else
yeah.
listening, look at they're
My
marked.
VHS bootleg just looked all, it was all 4:3.
Oh god, they're marked pan and scan. They're marked IMAX enhanced on Disney Plus. I think all the way back to Iron Man, they've actually done that now.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, pretty cool, pretty neat little feature there. I definitely appreciated that. And in general, this movie was shot on film, at least in part, which is very surprising for a modern blockbuster of any kind, but especially in the MCU with its effects heavy. They are typically shot all on digital, but there's a little bit of film grain here in this movie, which is just cool to see. And I know there was a lot of headlines during production about being shot on location. And a lot of big sets were built. I know like Babylon, I think the big like gate was all practical and stuff, which is pretty cool.
Cool.
You don't see that a lot in the MCU, but not even attacking the MCU. You just don't see that a lot in modern blockbusters in general. So it was cool to have that emphasis, to have some of that tangible sets, which you can definitely feel and tell. And for a movie like this, that is, again, a cast from all around the world, takes place all around the world, it's important to kind of be true to that and have some on-set locations that feel different from one another.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
In Babylon specifically, it looks so cool. That vivid blue wall that just kind of sits in the middle of that, not quite desert, but landscape is so stunning. The use of color in this movie is very good, which again, not something to say about a lot of MCU movies, but the colors really pop whenever they want it to. And that blue wall is so striking. It reminds me of one of my favorite movies, The Fall. If anybody has happened to have seen that, go try to find it. It's hard to find now, but if you can get a hold of it, it is a visually stunning movie, and they use colors similarly a lot in that movie, as they have this blue wall that really pops in Eternals.
No, I agree. I think that it's just a very cool look. Like I said, it uses the color really well. It's very unique. It's part of the same reason I kind of like the scenes where Kingo is shooting the Bollywood stuff. You're getting just, again, a cool use of color with the costumes and the sets that he's on. But that Babylon sequence in particular is just very, very well done. I believe that thing, that the gate is practical. I'm sure they didn't rebuild the whole building, but just using practical sets like that, it's just a lost art in general. Like I said, that's not a shot at the MCU. That's a shot at everything. There's a lot of things that just don't use practical sets anymore because
I'm not insulting the MCU. I'm insulting Hollywood. All of it.
I'm insulting films everywhere, folks. Hashtag positivity podcast. But
I criticize to make you better.
Without me, you'd be nothing. But no, that Babylon sequence in particular is just very cool. I like that sequence a lot as well. Because again, it's just, you get a brief action sequence and then you again get the characters kind of being themselves. And those are, like you said, some of the strongest parts of the movie.
I mentioned earlier when we're talking about Fastos that I really like the scene of him in Hiroshima, distraught about what had occurred there. And then we get the smash cut to him and his suburban life. A very nice character moment. And we get the Eternals rolling up again, trying to recruit him to the cause. And there's a fun exchange here where, first off, there's a running gag where every time they meet up again, they explain away their friendship by telling someone else that they're friends from college, which is just a fun recurring gag.
Yeah.
But on top of that, Fastos, talking to Icarus, says, "Can I call you Clark? Is that what you go by now?" So, Andrew, again, DC Comics exist in the MCU, and they exist as comics. Now, it kind of...
I'm guessing.
It kind of works here, because a big theme in this movie is that a lot of our mythology and characters are based and inspired by Eternals throughout time. Yeah. So, possibly, Superman was inspired by Icarus. in this universe.
It's very possible, yes.
On top of that, in an earlier scene, Gilgamesh, whenever he's introduced to Kingo's valet, says, "Oh, a valet, like Alfred and Batman." Do you think these are like friendly insults to the DC? Like, in this universe, our heroes are real, and you guys are just in the pages of a comic book in our universe. Or am I reading into it too much?
That seems like a strange flex, because you're basically like, we're only gonna say you're a comic in our films. Like, I don't like, if that's the comment you're going for, it just feels kind of dumb to me. Like, but I think it's more just like, I don't know. And like, this goes back, like in Spider-Man, there's the throwaway line from Aunt May of, "You're not Superman," like, or is it Spider-Man 2? I don't remember. But, there's always kind of been this weird, like I've said that, people get confused sometimes that Superman is like this iconic figure because so many people don't really like Superman. But they kind of forget that he really is just like this pop culture icon, whether they realize it or not. Superman is just a thing. So I think just with a lot of things, it's just easy to make a Superman joke in a lot of cases because he's an easy reference point because everybody knows who Superman is. And in this movie, obviously, with Icarus being who he is, which is literally Superman created by Jack Kirby in 1976, like, you're drawing a much cleaner line because, he's a guy who can fly, shoot lasers out of his head. He's super strong. He's invulnerable. And he wears a blue suit. Like, it's, you're not fooling anybody at that point. But I think they're just fun throwaway lines. I think that's all it really is.
Well, it gets more complicated because moments after this reference, they are inside of Phastos' house, and Icarus is holding a children's coloring book or activity book based on Star Wars. So Star Wars exists in the MCU, which has been established before. And Spider-Man, they have the Star Wars Lego set. But you got to wonder that they don't watch those movies and make, this Mace Windu guy, he looks an awful lot like Nick Fury, doesn't he?
I mean, that's always been funny to me that in Avengers Endgame, they're going through all the list of time travel movies, and they mention Hot Tub Time Machine. And what's very funny to me about Hot Tub Time Machine being mentioned is that Sebastian Stan is in that movie as one of like the snowboarding jocks. So like, again, nobody watched that movie and was like, huh. No one else seeing this? No one, you seen this? You heard about this?
The most egregious example of that has to be in the same movie, Tony Stark calling Fat Thor, Lebowski, who's played by Kurt Russell. No, just kidding. Who's
I hate you, Chris.
Who's played by Jeff Bridges, who looks an awful lot like Obadiah Stane, who was the first villain that Iron Man had to fight.
Yeah, it's always the funny part about like bringing in these things, because you're eventually always going to run into a situation like that.
Yeah,
where, like,
always.
You will inevitably be like, even more so, Captain Marvel, like, establishing that, like, Mallrats is a film in the universe. But because, like, Stan Lee is in Mallrats as the creator of the Marvel Universe. Like, how are you reconciling this?
Stan Lee's cameos alone already break that logic.
Right, sure. But, like, just the fact that they legitimately were like, Mallrats is a movie in the MCU. And I'm like, all right, well, that certainly raises a few questions. But I assume it's all just in good fun. I'm not the guy with the whiteboard trying to reconcile the Kevin Smith and the MCU theory.
This whole scene, the whole scene at Phastos' suburban home is very fun. It's very sweet. Get some good comic relief here because Phastos is claiming that he has stopped using his powers. He's trying to live the simple life. He has a second chance with his family, and all he wants to do is stay with them. And Icarus sees right through that, and he blasts his laser eyes at the window. We find out that the glass is some special technology glass, I guess, that is protecting his home and his family. And he tries to go one step further, and the table they're sitting at, he's like, what is this, made out of vibranium? And he slams his fist on it, and it snaps in half because it was actually a table from IKEA. And I appreciate the relatability because 70% of my furniture is from IKEA. The desk I am sitting at right now as I record this podcast
as is mine. I like that a lot. It reminds me there's this gag that's in like every version of The Tick where he comes into Arthur's apartment and he's immediately like, all right, where's your superhero headquarters trigger? And so he starts ripping apart his apartment looking for the trigger that's going to uncover all of his superhero stuff, but there's never actually one. He's just destroying all of his furniture, trying to find it. And it just reminded me of that same kind of energy of, oh, whoops, my bad, guys.
I think the amount of humor in this movie is really well done. I mean, we've got Kingo
Yes.
that is just hilarious every second he's on screen, along with his valet. But by and large, it's not, I wouldn't call it one of the funnier MCU movies. It's not like
No.
Guardians or Ragnarok, where it is basically a comedy is its second genre.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good balance. And one of my favorite gags, it's so weird. I don't even know if I understand it, but I find it very funny, is whenever they get back on the ship and they have all of the various things that Makari has stolen, and they're casually just all going through it, and Icarus
I know where you're going with this.
Icarus is holding like this old book. I don't even know what it is. It is very like clearly like ancient book. And Druid walks up with a box of Twinkies, and they lock eyes, and they slowly like change hands. They exchange these items, and Druid grabs the book, and Icarus grabs the Twinkies, and they do it like they're exchanging cash for like a ransom. Like
Yeah,
they're unsure the
like-
other one's gonna double cross them in this high stakes exchange. I
That
don't
was
know.
what I was. That's what I was hoping you were going to talk about, because that's so like it's funny, but at the same time, I'm like, why do I have like any reference for why Icarus gives anything about Twinkies? Like,
Why is it just like, hey, can I have that? Yeah, sure, man. It's like, what are you gonna do to me? It's very funny.
That was actually an emerald tablet that he took from Icarus, and it was the emerald tablet that Makari and Droog were talking about when they were in Babylon.
Okay.
So that was why he wanted it. But just the fact that, so he's got a reason to want the tablet. Don't get me wrong. But like, why can't you, like you said, why can't you just be like, hey, yo, can I see that? Like, why do you have to have this weird standoff? And then again, why does Icarus want the Twinkies? I don't understand. Because then he like opens the box and he goes to take one. It's like, I guess this dude loves his Twinkies. Give me the Twinkie cut, guys. Where is it?
There's a deleted scene of like Icarus in Babylon. Like, what if one day there's like this breaded snack with a cream filling? That'd be nice.
That lasted forever. Yes. No, it's just, you're right. That is such a weird gag. I couldn't help but laugh at it just because it's so weirdly contrasted with those characters, but it's a weird one.
We haven't really talked about the final fight. We should jump into that. This has most of our Eternals. We've got two members that are deceased by this point, and Kingo decides to really sit this fight out. He's a lover, not a fighter, I think is what they're going for.
He's a conscientious objector.
There you go. Very nice. Very well said. There's a lot of cool action set pieces here. There's a lot of the characters using their powers together in very interesting ways. We praise this all the time on this show. Fantastic Four movies do a great job of this, using their abilities in unique ways in tandem with one another. So at first, they're all fighting Icarus, and he is levitating in the air using his laser beams. And Makari runs up, and she sort of does like a donut underneath him to launch all of the sand from the beach up in the air to cloud his vision, and then Thena jumps up and slashes him down. And that is so cool.
Awesome.
Like, for a while, Makari is using her super speed to punch him very fast and run in circles and disorient him, and that is cool. I love seeing a speedster do that all the time. But the thought process of being like, what else can someone do with super speed? Like, oh, they can disturb the sand on the beach and launch it into the air. Like, that's pretty cool. That's not the most obvious thing. And that kind of thought process in the action scenes is really on full display here.
Yeah.
Really well done.
Yeah, I like that a lot, especially when, because at this point, the true machinations of everything have been revealed. The Celestial is about to be born. He's going to destroy the Earth. And Icarus has turned on the team. He has decided that they have one goal in life, and that is to serve Arishem. And if Arishem says this is what they're supposed to do, to go against that is like, he can't fathom it. He can't, like, it. He's like, but Arishem is like our creator, our leader. Like, why would we not do what he wants us to do? And you get all those shades represented in all the characters, because like Icarus is very much, we have a mission from Arishem, that's it. that's literally what we do. There is nothing else to it. If we're not going to do that, what are we even doing? Now, Sprite goes to his side. I mentioned this earlier. Not necessarily for Arishem reasons, but more for selfish reasons of like, I'm tired of living like this and I want out. And the only way out is for the mission to be completed. Now, Kingo he kind of agrees with Icarus. He's kind of in this weird, like, as he takes him aside at one point when they're kind of all blowing up at the ship. And he's like, I will follow you to the end like I always have. And that flashes us back to Icarus killing Ajax, which is the kind of big twist, is that Ajax was set up to die by Icarus, essentially. And so Kingo decides to sit it out. He's like, I don't necessarily disagree with what Icarus is saying, but I'm not going to like fight my family, essentially. I will not be in the middle of this conflict. And then obviously the rest of them are all on the side of like, I have a vested interest in this planet and in these people, or they're disillusioned enough with Arishem and his mission that they don't want it to succeed. So you get a lot of spectrum here between the characters and where they're at and why they're doing what they're doing. And then it leads to these really great action set pieces. And then one of my favorites of this finale is the Athena Crow fight, where they're going back and forth in the cave. This is so they have the fight with Icarus initially, and then Crow shows up, the kind of super deviant at this point. And that leads to a big scene between him and Athena. And this hits so much better because you know she's still thinking of the fact that this guy killed Gilgamesh. And so she gets a chance to really like let him have it. like really gives it to him. And it's one of the most satisfying things in the movie for me, for her to kind of get that kind of personal satisfaction in knowing the thing that killed Gilgamesh won't be killing anything else.
I think there's a line about it, like, revenge won't make you feel better. And she's like, but killing him will.
Yeah. Like, you know, it's very cool. Very well done. Like the final moments of that fight where like, it almost looks like Crow's about to win. And then she like gives the sneak attack. I was like in the theater, even I was just like, yes.
Yeah.
Like, good. Like
very good.
I was very sad at how this was about to go.
She sort of has the upper hand in the fight at first. And I really like the storytelling via action set piece where for Crow to get the upper hand, he uses Gilgamesh's powers against Athena. He uses Gilgamesh's big punch to knock her off of him. And then he has control of the fight after that. And then he even uses like Gilgamesh's voice to taunt her. And it's very good. And like I said, it looks like Athena's going to fall there because her eyes turn white like they do whenever she's having an episode. But good old sneak attack. Good old slice them up. And then there's 3 seconds before they fall apart into pieces. Haven't seen that in a while. And they pull one of those out.
It's pretty awesome.
Question for you, Andrew. My Sprite's big scene is here, right? Her big impassioned speech, because she stabs Cersei before Cersei can make it to the Celestial to stop the emergence. And then she talks about why she feels this way and why she doesn't want to save the Earth, because she's had to go so long with being taunted by a life that she can't have because she doesn't age. And it's very well done. Like I said, it's the key scene for the character. At the very end of it, abruptly, Druig from off screen hits her in the back of the head with a rock and she just falls flat on the ground.
Yep.
I laugh every time. Is that supposed to be fun? Do you think they were going for a comedy beat there? It gives me such a whiplash to be like, wow, I get this. I don't agree with her, but I get this character and this tournament that she's had. And then, she's knocked out with a rock.
No, I definitely think there was supposed to be like a moment of like at least harder exhaling in that, because like it's this it's the moment where like it's all falling apart, where like Cersei, who's supposed to save the day, has been stabbed, and Sprite has just created 7 fake volcanoes, and Cersei apparently can't remember where the original one just was. But it all builds to this like, it's kind of hopeless right now, and then Drew just comes up. But yeah, I think there's definitely meant to be some humor there.
Now, at the end of this movie, at the end of the film itself, as well as a mid-credit scene and post-credit scene, it's all about setting up future installments and where the MCU as a whole is going to go. We talked already about Arishem the Judge, promising to judge us, and what that is setting up. Also, at the end of the movie, Dane Whitman says to Cersei that it turns out his family history is complicated, and that he's maybe been keeping a secret from her. And that comes up again in the post credits at the very end of the movie. He is looking at a sword that is calling out to him. It looks like it has some mystical powers, and before he grabs it, off screen, we hear the voice of Mahershala Ali, which we as MCU enthusiasts know that he is cast to be the next Blade. On top of this, there's a mid-credit scene where we see, oh boy, you got to help me with this one. The appearance of Thanos' brother, who goes by Star Fox, or maybe Eros, and he's accompanied by a troll that sounds an awful lot like Patton Oswalt. And
because it is Patton Oswalt.
I know, Andrew. And Star Fox, I'm gonna call him Star Fox, is played by One Direction guy. What's his name?
Harry Styles.
Harry Styles, yes. Who's also in Dunkirk.
Also
right?
in Dunkirk.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
Small world. So Andrew, I understand almost none of these references, other than, like I said, the fact that Mahershala Ali I know is playing Blade. I didn't even know that was his voice though until like a week ago. Someone in our Discord mentioned that.
Right.
I was like, oh, that's what it's teasing, Blade. So, comic book expert Andrew, explain to me, what are all these references, please?
So we'll start with the Ebony Blade, because the Ebony Blade is Black Knight's chosen weapon. He's used some things other times, but the Ebony Blade is, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but like there's a lot of things that the sword can do, one of which is it absorbs souls to make itself stronger. I assume the voices of those souls is the voices we're hearing from the sword. So I'm guessing he's struggling over whether or not he should take this thing and use it to assumedly help fight this god that just took Cersei. Good luck with that, buddy. But as he is about to like make this choice, a voice basically like asks him if he's ready for it, and that's Blade. So obviously, I'm guessing Black Knight is going to dovetail into whatever the plans for Blade are. I don't know if this means that they'll show up in the Blade film, or if maybe they'll both show up in Moon Knight. But yeah, it's an odd thing that like. And like I said, I mentioned earlier, there's been Black Knight stories where he fights vampires. Certainly not unprecedented.
I would love if the line that Mahershala said was, "Hey, you ready to fight Dracula on the moon?"
And I would have been like so ready for it. I would have been like, "Get me in, guys. Let's do it." Yeah, it's a weird scene, because even as like a giant fan, I'm not entirely sure where they're going with it. But overall, it's clearly setting up other stuff, and that's obviously the Ebony Blade. So. We'll see. Really, that one is genuinely something where it's like, we are going to have to see where this goes. Now, as far as Star Fox goes, Star Fox is technically a member of the Eternals. As also, to be fair, though, I think Thanos is also technically one of the Eternals, because in the comics, the Eternals are very different. But Star Fox is the brother of Thanos. As far as what this means and how he factors into it, I couldn't really tell you, given that Thanos is dead. But obviously, this feels like something where it could be like a Guardians thing. Like, obviously, Star Fox and Pip Patrol would fit very well into that universe.
Okay, hang on. Super basic questions here. He's Thanos' brother. Is he a bad guy?
No.
Are they full brothers? Like they share the same parents, like the traditional sense of the word brother?
Maybe half brothers.
Okay. I
think they're full brothers, though.
Is he named after the Nintendo character with robotic legs that flies the ship and is told to do barrel rolls?
Well, Star Fox debuts in 1973. The character in the comics. I think that predates robot legs.
Okay.
And this guy is actually, he's introduced in the same comic Thanos first is. So it is Iron Man 55 from 1973. So this is somebody who was like retroactively made part of the Eternals, as was Thanos. Thanos is actually supposedly an eternal deviant. He's like both of them. So that's why he's purple, I guess. But yeah, Eros, and his name is Eros. It's like,
but his cool name
Thanos
is Star
is
Fox.
just Thanos. Yeah, his name is Eros, but his cool name is his made up name is Star Fox. So he was a big part of like a lot of that Jim Starlin cosmic stuff from the 70s with Captain Marvel and things like that. As far as what he's gonna do going forward, I really don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah, we will. But yeah, this is Thanos' brother appearing with Pip the Troll, who is another long stay cosmic character. If they dovetail into Guardians, that would make perfect sense. But really, it could go anywhere. I mean, I really don't know. But yeah, it's definitely a strange scene. And even Tiamat, the Celestial that's not born out of the planet, like, he's the dreaming Celestial. That's who he's supposed to become. And like, he's also kind of important in a lot of this Celestial stuff. So they set up, so between Tiamat, the dreaming Celestial, the Ebony Blade, Star Fox / Eros / Pip the Troll, like, yeah, we've introduced like, 5 or 6 different threads to follow now. And I kind of like that I don't really know where all this goes yet. Like, we've gotten, between all the different shows, we've gotten a lot of hints at things, but we haven't gotten a lot of like, this is where it's leading. Like, the end of phase 1 told us Thanos is the guy. And that's what we're building to eventually. And we don't really have a lot of that yet with phase 4, where there's whatever the overarching. We've got a couple of things that could be overarching things at this point. Like, we've obviously got the Kang of it all. We've got this
Adam
Earth
Warlock.
side. We've got Adam Warlock. We've got now Erisham at the top of things. We've got a technical Celestial that, I mean, if you can turn him dead, you could probably turn him back alive again. So he's sitting in the middle of the Earth. And then you've also got the Earth side stuff with Baal and the possible Thunderbolts Dark Avengers. So who knows where this is going, but definitely you got places to go. So we'll see.
Well, hey, I think that does it for our talk on Eternals. Our first venture into the MCU on this show.
Yes. Maybe not the last.
Maybe
but you never
not the
know.
last. We'll see. We'll see where we go with this. But we also have, of course, our bonus episode that we released on Spider-Man No Way Home. Please go check that out if you haven't already. If you have seen the movie, we spoil the heck out of it. But what a fun time that was.
Yes, I agree.
Pretty exciting times to be an MCU fan, to be a superhero fan. Yeah, I mean, we kind of, I'll be honest, after Endgame and Far From Home, I was kind of feeling like some MCU fatigue. Not that the quality had dropped or anything, but it's been so much. And of course, the pandemic slowed everything down and we kind of got this break. But now that stuff's kind of coming out regularly, like, all right, I'm on board again. I'm ready for some more stuff. I've been enjoying the shows for the most part in these new movies.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, like I said, that was the interesting thing, is when Eternals came out, I remembered seeing like 6 headlines that were all just like, is the MCU finally done? And there was, there was the snob articles that were kind of like, finally we'll be free from this behemoth that's just been dominating cinema and blah, 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 blah. Written by Martin Scorsese. But it's but like there was just a lot of people that were like, all right, but like there was also people that were like, all right, so it was a misstep. Like, it's arguably like the first major misstep they've made. And then now, like I said, once No Way Home came out, everyone was just like, boom, we're back. Like, everybody's back on board again. And I'm like, all right, cool. But like, is it a home run? I don't know. But like, I was like, we're trying something different, and maybe it didn't land. And I think, it's that weird double-edged sword of like, you try something different, it doesn't succeed, but I'm still appreciating them trying different things.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Better than playing it safe all the time and getting stale. Definitely recommend at least checking out if you're a fan of the MCU. I'm not going to recommend you skip over this movie. Not only is there a lot of important implications, but there's a good time to be had here. Check it out on that IMAX enhanced version on Disney Plus. And when you're done with that, stop by Apple Podcast and leave a review for our show. I always ask you to go one step farther, leave a review for every show that you listen to regularly. It's something fast, free, and fun that you can do that we certainly appreciate. And you can bet if you leave a review for our show, we will read it on a future episode. So put whatever you want in there. I'm going to say it out loud.
Yeah.
I also hear tell that Spotify is beginning to roll out a feature to leave reviews for podcasts on that platform. So if that is where you listen to us, see if that option is available. Leave us a review and I will check it out over there. And again, read it on a future episode. But until then, folks, please remember, maybe not all movies are great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impress for the music. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch.tv. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way we're going to grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. Whew. Now, another performance I absolutely love in this movie is Leah McHugh as Sprite. Confusingly, she doesn't have the green suit. Her name is Sprite. Does that not land? Does that work? Okay.
I get it.
Yeah. We'll see if I cut that. She's got a nice bond with
Droog.
Droog. Is it Droog or Druig? I think it's Druig, right? Druid, but with a G.
Droog.
There's an I in there.
There is, but it's a silent I.
Lastly, Kit Harington.
Yeah.
Hello and fall collection. IKEA. Ass. I couldn't help it.